This week on Eye for Iran, Iran's water crisis deepens, rainfall at record lows, reservoirs running dry, the human toll devastating. The Islamic Republic has survived Israeli airstrikes, American bombs, and years of sanctions, but can it survive drought? As rivers vanish and reservoirs run dry, Iran's water crisis is now a full-blown national security issue, one that could destabilize the country from within. We speak with Dr. Kaveh Madani, director of the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health, known as the UN's think tank on water, on the truth behind Iran's collapsing water system.
There is no hope for a fundamental, I would say, resolution of this existential threat to a nation that deserves definitely much better than this.
Then, Israel and Iran. A new report out of Jerusalem reveals that a senior Israeli official believes Israel should work with Washington to push for regime change in Tehran before President Donald Trump leaves office in 2029. A bold warning or a viable strategy? We'll ask that question and break it down with Professor Aram Hessami, an Iranian-American political scientist.
So the question becomes, were they led, or their intelligence had led them to believe that there would be a revolution or a coup d'etat?
And a historic first. For the first time ever, a Syrian president meets a U.S. president in Washington, D.C. Ahmed al-Shara now says Iran is out of the country and that he's ready to build a partnership with the United States. We'll speak with Jasmine Nemo, a Syrian-American political strategist who helped make many high-level meetings between U.S. officials and the Syrian leader happen and was in the room with the Syrian president.
His responses are always very diplomatic. Every time I've seen him, he's been, very respected, very respectable.
She gives her exclusive insight on what this could mean for Syria and the wider region. I'm Negar Moshahedi, and this is Eye for Iran. Dr. Kaveh Madani, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Professor Kaveh Madani is an environmental leader, a scientist, and a scholar. He is a director of the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health, known as the UN think tank on water. And also, Dr. Madani, you joined the government in 2017 in Iran to help address the water crisis. You left within months, of course, after being accused without evidence of espionage. So you've been warning about the water crisis for several years now. We know it's bad, but paint us a picture. Just how bad is it?
I think it's enough to tell you that the people of Tehran, the city that is the richest, most populous, and strongest politically, is running out of water, is facing day zero. That's my hometown. That's where I grew up. We've never seen such a thing during previous droughts and so on. And for those who don't know, when there is water shortage, we first cut from the environment, the voiceless stakeholder, then from farmers and agriculture, then from industry, and our last resort is the people who live in cities. And Tehran is a city for which they have tried anything possible physically, bringing water from anywhere possible and building many dams around it, but none of those has been sufficient, and the sky is not helping. It's the sixth year of drought. The new water year started on October 1st, in October, and so far the last weeks of the new water year have been also very dry, much drier than normal, and the drought is across the country. 6 years of drought, or even 5 years of drought, would paralyze any system. But if your system also has a major underlying mismanagement issues in every sector, including water, then the problem becomes more acute and serious.
It's a disaster. So what's the outcome? Are we going to run out of water in Tehran, for example, in the next coming weeks, the coming months? And I ask this because Pezeshkian, the president of Iran, had put out a warning in the summer that in 2 weeks the reservoirs are going to be so low that Tehran is going to run out of water. And it didn't happen in that case. So what is the outcome here?
So unfortunately, inconsistent messaging and improper communication is one of those elements of mismanagement that I just referred to. With better communication, more transparency, um, the crisis, if you will, if you want to name it a crisis, or as I say, Tehran's water bankruptcy could have been managed better. We don't know exactly how much water is left. Satellite images are telling us that the situation is terrible. Some of those reservoirs have already hit their dead storage capacity, meaning that even though you see some blue elements there, that water is not cannot be used because it's below the level of the spillways and outlets, and it's full of sediment, so it's useless. But we don't know the exact status of groundwater. Most of Tehran's water comes from groundwater, especially in dry years, over 60%. It's very hard to say when exactly the city would run out of water, but it is very close to day zero. It's a serious thing, and if it doesn't rain enough, this problem would not be resolved. So, but we are at a stage that even a few hours of rain can make a difference.
Well, that's good at least. So there is some hope then, potentially.
There is hope, but we should not be delusional, right? So it's a city. I mean, for the international audience, I should highlight this: Tehran is is drier than many other metropolitans around the world, but it's a city where there are ski resorts right nearby, and you can ski in Tehran. So Tehran has been benefiting from snow and snowmelt, lots of rain in the fall and spring, and then it has had dry summers. But now all of those seasons are very dry, and the city has how many people? Like more than the metropolitan, about 50 million. So it's a huge city, and if you bring so many people to any location in the world, you would eventually run out of water, especially if you don't work on controlling water consumption. This is something our research has shown for 2 decades. We have been alarming the world that providing more water without controlling water consumption and growth is a fix that would backfire. Indeed, it makes the situation worse because you bring water to a region that doesn't have the potential for growth, but you superficially bring that water, create the perception of water availability. That means more development. That means more opportunities. There are more people migrating to that place, and then your problem comes back at a larger scale, and the cost of mitigation and adaptation would be much, much higher. And that's something we had seen in Los Angeles, in Las Vegas, and now we're seeing it in Tehran and some other major metropolitans like Mashhad, Isfahan, and so on. Iran has more than 70% of its population living in cities, so urban areas. But most of it's like, these people, 90 million people we're talking about, that's the population of Iran. So more than 70% of this 90 million people live in major metropolitans. So only in a few big cities, that's how the distribution has happened. And Iran doesn't have many mid-size or small-size cities. That means most of the problems are concentrated in these places. Now, when they grow further and further, you take resources from other places and keep throwing it at these people, and they keep growing at the expense of other places not being at the expense of other places being underdeveloped. But eventually, even those band-aids would not work. The booster would not work, and you would face a problem. And that's why we see, like, for example, some other areas of Iran with a lot of potential for growth, with strategic value, like closer to the southern water, like coasts of the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman are not having much population. Even if they do, they struggle with water access, just sitting at the coast. And then, just recently we heard someone saying that they want to bring water from the Persian Gulf, desalinate water, and bring it to Tehran. We already
Would
know.
that work? Is that an actual plan in place, though?
They said it. I don't like, physics of it need to be studied. But even if it's a plan, let's start today. How long does it take, right? But we know that they have done it for Isfahan. We know that they're taking water from the Sea of Oman toward Mashhad. So those crazy plans are in place. And why do we call it crazy? Not because desalination is bad as a technology. Desalination is a technology, and like any other technology, it comes with some impacts, some negative impacts. Technologies must be used carefully when they are needed at the scale they are needed. And before you introduce a new technology, you got to see if you have taken other, you have used or exhausted all other measures, especially if they're much cheaper, right? So if I'm overweight and coming to you and I'm saying, I want to run marathon or something, right? And I'm in my 60, I'm 60 years old already with chest pain and sweating, and you should, as a responsible doctor, tell me that the first thing I need to do is changing my diet and losing weight. But I will tell you that no, you're not a good expert. You're the spy of this other country or that country. You're the enemy, and you should give me a pill that would resolve my issue or take me to surgery operations room and overnight make me a young thin runner. It's not going to work that way. You lose time. Your body is going to get worse and worse. You would lose your organs. Things would get worse and worse. And the further they delay that process, things become harder. That's why. But we know it's those decisions. The decisions that are fundamental are very hard to be made. They're politically costly. Whether you're dealing with Los Angeles, Vegas, or Tehran, those decisions are very costly. And now, if you're in a society there, that its economy is um, um, under pressure by sanctions, you have, you are in a resistance economy mode. You cannot diversify your economy. You cannot reduce the pressure of your economy on water and natural resources. That means that you would burn anything you have um, for resistance, and that includes your water, your soil, your mines, your forests, because you want to survive longer. That means that air pollution and water shortage is not your priorities because you want to fight the fight you have picked, and that's why there is no hope for a fundamental, I would say, resolution of this existential threat to a nation that deserves definitely much better than this.
100% deserves much better than this. Then what is, based on that analogy, what is the doctor's prescription then? Does that mean that there's just short-term political fixes rather than a long-term solution that would really work?
So there are, going back to that analogy, like there are multiple, things are happening at a multiple levels. So at the higher level, we are dealing with a crisis of a body, a bankruptcy situation. This cannot go back. Why do I call it bankruptcy? Because I believe that this stage of crisis, has already passed, right? During the crisis, you can still mitigate, but we are seeing damages that are irreversible. Surface water being our checking account is already empty. Groundwater being the saving account that the Iranians inherited from their ancestors has already been exhausted. And you have all these water right holders. The expenditure consumption is more than the available water, regardless of if it rains or not. If it's wet or dry, you're over consuming and you're using non-renewable water resources you're saving. And then things, damages would occur. They're unavoidable, right? Because if you use too much, then it's a simple mass balance. If you use too much water upstream, then there is not enough water to get into your wetlands. Lake Urumia dries up, Gulf Khuni dries up, Jazmurian, even Anzali north of Iran near the Caspian coast dries up. So it doesn't matter how much water you have, you would exhaust everything and don't let that flow into the wetlands. So then you see wetlands, rivers, shrinking. Surface water ecosystems are getting destroyed, groundwater level declining, land subsidence is the next outcome. Sinkholes, the things that are very new to Iran, deforestation, desertification, sand and dust storms, loss of biodiversity, and so a domino effect of these bad decisions, appear in every sector, and they're interconnected. The moment you dry up a large ecosystem like Lake Urumia, then you affect the temperature in the region. Then that would also affect on formation of clouds and raining and many other things. Or temperature is up in cities, then there's no snow, or there's a high level of snow melt. You're losing your glaciers, and many other things that are happening at the local level, in addition to what is happening at the global level, climate change, right? So, and the climate change becomes a catalyst. It increases the intensity,
Compounds.
frequency of your extreme events, right? So let's not forget that Iran had a drought at the time I was in the office. Then there were like 2 wet years, and many people even claim that the drought is over and the new era of, a new wet era has, started in Iran. Even blaming those people who had criticized dam building, those who were encouraging the nation to use, nature-based solutions for aquifer recharge and so on. And there were lots of even conspiracy theories suggesting that those who talked about water bankruptcy or water shortage were the forces of the enemy, because they wanted to shut down the agricultural sector and prevent further development. And yet we are back in this mode again. But in a few months, we might have a lot of floods across the country. Let's not forget that. I don't know when your audience would listen to this, but that's a part of the natural cycle. Persians have had floods and droughts before the Islamic Republic, before the previous regimes. Those have been those are the integral elements of the hydrological cycle. But with climate change, their size, their intensity, their frequency would change. We would see more extremes, and you gotta manage this situation. So these catalysts are adding pain, or let's say your house is already on fire because of your bad decisions, and there is fuel being added to the fire. Flames are everywhere, undeniable, but the whole nation is burning together, regardless of who is responsible. Now, at the larger scale, it's like you got to lose weight. You have to reduce consumption. That's a fact that's needed.
A must, right? Yeah.
Anything that can be done there, right? So 90% of the water, 90% of Iran's water is being allocated to agriculture. It's mainly relying on irrigated agriculture. Iran can produce more food, more strategic food, with less number of farmers, less water and less land area, provided that Iran creates alternative employment opportunities and modes of livelihood for the rural communities and those farmers. So then it can industrialize its agriculture and invest in what's its concern, because the slogans of food self-sufficiency or food independence or food security have not worked even after so many decades. Iran still is not fully food secure. Even if it is, then if you secure one sector and then the other sector is failing, at the end of the day, human security and national security are threatened in Iran. So consumption reduction in that sector. You go to the industrial sector, you see a lot of inefficiency. You see things in wrong locations. You go to the urban areas, Iranians are wasteful, if you will, like very Western, I would say, water consumption patterns, right? So we in North America, we are being blamed for being wasteful when it comes to water, compared to the Europeans, for example. So Iranians are also like living a life that doesn't appreciate water as a limit to growth. It doesn't appreciate that they have water shortage to begin with. And that's why we need consumption reduction in every sector. We need to increase efficiency, reduce the leakage, recycle and reuse wastewater, and many other things, and introduce new technologies and technological interventions in addition to implementation of proper policies. But all of those are long-term, and many of those are not in the authority of those who manage the country's water environment or even agriculture. These are macro-level decisions to be made. They're very, very complex and take a long time. It needs a patriot who will be willing to get crucified, because even if they introduce something tomorrow, let's say you remove the subsidies, then there would be chaos because lots of other things have not been fixed. If you say, okay, I'm going to cut from the farmers and give it to Lake Urumia, you would make the farmers bankrupt. So it's not an easy decision to be made. In the short term, those are very costly. The general public would blame you, would hate you. In the long run, history might celebrate you, and people might not even notice that you were the one that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago did something that helped the nation from a collapse. So that patriot must exist, but with on top, you have to have the right recipe in place and the environment in place to be able to cook what needs to be delivered. But that's the macro level thing. That's a long-term thing. In the short term, though, what matters in Tehran is, regardless of all these long-term drivers and the bad mistakes and the legacy problems created by previous governments, decision makers, and the past people, you can go back to where the Iranians were using qanats and question why we are not there, why we are still not using it. The reality is that that's a city with so many people. That's a country with so many people. You cannot run that country on qanats. You have the infrastructure in place and the network of things that are functioning, and they are inefficient. What matters at this point in time is to make sure that the taps don't run dry. And believe it or not, again, it's another case where the people of Iran should be paying for the mismanagement of the government, and they're the ones who can rescue the system, or at least provide some resistance by reduction of their use. And if they do so, then if you have a few days or a few weeks of water left, that can, resistance can become longer and stronger until the sky is a rescue. And if it rains, still there is no guarantee that the next summer Tehran would have water, but there would be a temporary relief. The government can also do a much better job when it comes to communication, transparency, telling people exactly how much water is left, telling people how much reduction in consumption they have collectively achieved, telling people that what it has been doing or is doing in response, with not only expecting the citizens to do something, but also showing a desire for a change and willingness to make reforms and change behavior, and then so start with moral incentives, encouraging people to save, and then penalizing those who don't follow. I mean, this is a serious crisis. It doesn't matter how mad you are at the Islamic Republic. If you're using it, it's a zero-sum game. If you have a pool in your house, that's at my expense. And what happens in a situation like this is that the rich get away with it. They buy a pump. They put a tank on their apartment complex. The poor are the ones who lose. The others don't even feel the interruption. Their consumption would not be affected. But encouraging the citizens to reduce consumption for a country that has gone through a war, for a country that doesn't have the trust of its citizen, the social, political capital is very hard. We saw it during COVID-19. The COVID-19 crisis, the governments who had that capital could do a better overall job of managing the crisis. It doesn't mean that they made the best decisions when they said, stay at home. This group should get vaccinated first, or do this, do that. Still, there were a lot of mistakes, but the societies accepted that they're in it together, and then he needed to act on it. Whereas the societies where governments didn't have privilege conspiracy theories were dominant. Every decision was being questioned, and people were suspicious and still are suspicious of all of those decisions. And at the end of the day, they are all dissatisfied. This is another situation that people would be dissatisfied at the end of the day, but that's what governments are there for. They are there to be blamed, sometimes correctly and sometimes incorrectly.
So I guess in this case, it sounds like, yes, there are solutions, but those solutions really are not going to make the situation better. It just prevents it from getting less bad, if you will. And my question is, a lot of people are asking me, and you mentioned this as an existential threat and a threat to national security. And I just got asked yesterday, well, Nagar, does this mean that people are going to rise up and there's going to be regime change? And I mean, my own personal opinion, as I just said, listen, like, I think that's a little bit naive because, if I'm there and I'm worried about getting water, a basic necessity, I'm not necessarily going to be thinking about, human rights personally. But then at the same time, I mean, this could be a trigger. And there are so many triggers and so much mismanagement and corruption in Iran that one trigger over another trigger may cause something. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm with you that it's naive to think that an extreme drought would necessarily lead to a regime change in a country. Even if it does, if it doesn't rain, doesn't matter. Like, people would still struggle. This is a long-term thing. You give me the country tomorrow and I have the full authority, like, to do anything I want. This is going to be costly. People would be mad at me, and it takes years to fix some of the things. And some of the damages are permanent, irreversible, no matter what. And no matter who's in charge. Yet triggers of that lead to protests can be very random. Things we have seen it in Iran. Sometimes you expect people coming out and be mad at something that very obvious, and there is no reaction. And some other times a change of an egg price in one, that can lead to major protests. Sometimes the urban areas join forces, and sometimes it's the rural area. So those are very hard to predict, to forecast. When you look back, they're easy to backcast and say, "Oh, all the signals were there; it was obvious." But honestly, it is very hard to make forecasts and predict those moments. As you said, the bandwidth of people becomes more and more limited, and they have when they're struggling with water shortage, hunger, and satisfying the basic needs of their lives, it is very hard for them to think about other important matters like freedom, women's rights, and other issues. I hope whatever it is, it would be better for the quality of life of the Iranians, and I don't want to see them suffer like this.
And Dr. Madani, just two questions to wrap up that I'm very curious about. And number one, we're hearing reports that Tehran might have to evacuate if the situation gets worse. And, I remember when Donald Trump put out that tweet in the middle of the 12-day war for, a city of, by extension, the greater Tehran area, 16 million people to evacuate. And it doesn't seem very feasible. And then there's also reports out there that Pezeshkian is saying, potentially proposing, and we've heard this before too with other Iranian leaders, to move the capital from Tehran to the south, where you are closer to water. And how does that work? Is that something like you move the businesses and the centers that attract people to the city, or how would that all play out?
Evacuation is not possible. Relocation of the capital is not either. And if you decide to do so, you have to question like why Tehran got into this situation and how that new capital would be any different before you make such a decision. So evacuation is not possible, but there has been a practice of prolonging the weekends during in the days with high level of air pollution, during days with high level of electricity demand, peak electricity use, and they have been effective because people leave the cities. And then if you're talking about days of water left, weeks of water left, even few hours of saving would make a huge difference. That's why even we have temporary outages overnight or other times of the day, because they are helpful to the supplier in managing the supply. But I don't know if you wanted to make sure that people receive the message or imply that this is a serious thing, take us seriously. But relocation of the capital, which has been something that people talk about, is a fundamental thing. Like, the capital of Iran is its most populous city. But the next capital of Iran should not be necessarily its most populous city. You got to first think about why you're moving the capital. I said this on my social media yesterday that it reminds me of an old joke that there was a hole somewhere in a remote area, and government people get together to solve the issue because people were falling, like drivers were falling into that hole. It was creating accidents and injuries, and until they take the patient to the nearest hospital 3 hours out, in the nearest city, a lot of people were dying. So they said, we got to do something about it. And the first suggestion is, let's put an ambulance next to the hole, and then take these people to the nearest hospital. So then it goes to the parliament. The parliament questions this decision, saying that this is unacceptable because even if you speed up the emergency response, still some people would die in this process, and we should not be doing this. You need to build a hospital near the hole in that remote area. And then it goes to the higher level, let's say the Supreme Council in Iran, and the Supreme Council says, no, this is absolutely unacceptable. It's a waste of resources and money, and you can't do that. Why don't you go and fill that hole out there and come and dig a hole with the same magnitude and same dimensions just next to the nearest hospital in the city. So if something happens, then there would be fast response. So we got to think about why the city became full of problems before you dig another hole somewhere else in the country. If you think that way, then you can address the problems fundamentally.
That's a great analogy. And any concluding or final thoughts, Dr. Madani?
No, I'm just worried, and I want us to also remember that these days were real, and if in a few months there are floods, we don't conclude that the problem has been resolved forever. This is something that we might see more of, and it is important to keep the sensitivity of the society, I think, high to a matter that matters to every Iranian. If the Islamic Republic is there or not, this is a national security issue. This is a national issue. It's related to the Iranians' dignity, to their quality of life, and water must be protected by all means. And I think it's important that everyone concerned about Iran and anyone who has his or her heart back at home would contribute to that cause.
One question I didn't ask is, what if there's no floods? What if there's no rain? Does that literally mean that, for example, a city like Tehran or Esfahan or any of the big cities will not have water by January?
Yes,
Like the
yes,
scale?
it means tankers. It means similar to the scenes you have seen in other places. Yes, we don't remember this, but in the United Nations, we work with many nations around the world near to and many of them don't have that situation and have access to clean tap water that more than 99% of the Iranian population in the urban areas had access to. That's could be a new reality. Pumps and storage, some tankers, delivery through tankers, use of more bottled water instead of tap water, and a change of a lifestyle. Maybe some people migrate out because it's just it's not attractive to live there. The problem, though, is that other cities are not doing it any better. So you cannot move from Tehran to Ahvaz and say, like, okay, I'm going to improve the quality of life. And opportunities are different, right? So you living in a remote remote area, a small city, would not offer you the same opportunities that Tehran or big metropolitans offer you. It's really scary, and I think it's still not being communicated properly. People are still waiting for magic, for cloud seeding, for someone to come and manipulate the weather so it starts raining, and thinking that if these guys are gone, then tomorrow we'll have a lot of rain. Unfortunately, the nature doesn't work that way, and then doesn't care about our political issues.
No, that's a very good point, and thank you so much, Dr. Madani, and thank you for everything that you've done and continue to do. And I know that you've paid the price for it, and we're very, very lucky in the Iranian community around the world to have you.
You're very kind. Thank you.
Professor Aram Hessami, a political science professor of Iranian origin, thank you so much for joining us today from Maryland.
Sure, quite welcome.
So, Dr. Hessami, Israeli media is reporting that Israeli senior officials are saying, allegedly, that Israel needs to go back into Iran and finish the job, so to speak, and push for regime change before the end of Trump's presidency in 2029. How significant is this?
I don't think it's a game changer, if you want to call it that. The question is whether the objective of Netanyahu or IDF is to basically negotiate some kind of a deal, or really they want regime change. Then the question becomes, well, are they willing to put troops on the ground? And you see the experience the world has seen in the past 25 years. I should go back to the beginning of 2001. Regime change has not been so successful. You saw what happened in Afghanistan. You see Libya, Egypt. I think when you make your objectives that way and you announce it, it may be change in a rhetoric, but the reality on the ground doesn't change, even after the 12-day war in June.
It's interesting. So you mentioned boots on the ground. Like, what would regime change? We hear that word, but what would it entail? What would it look like? And what could it actually result in?
A good question again. If by regime change you mean Khamenei's death, or by regime change you mean total different form of government, or
That's
if
the
you
thing. I don't
mean
know. I don't know what the Israeli officials mean when they say that.
Exactly. I mean, if you remember, George W. Bush mentioned that in Iraq and Iran long time ago. If you remember, 2001, before the invasion of Iraq, really, before 2003, and it was a big question was, are we going back to the old Cold War days and have puppet regimes that we installed puppet regimes in there friendly to the West or to the East, I guess? Or do you mean by regime change, policy change? And again, nuclear or security concerns. And I think here you can see that if you think of the Islamic Republic as an ideologically motivated and driven by ideological Shia concern, then do you mean to change the regime to a non-ideological and more secular? But even that is a problem, because if you know, the Ba'athist regime in Iraq was secular. And so you wanted a regime change. So the question is, you want a friendly government. As if that's what you mean, if I'm posturing, I want a friendly government. Maybe you're signaling Zarif or Rouhani or Pezeshkian. We want a friendly government. Stop this, destruction of Zionist state rhetoric. I don't know. You should ask
Sorry
the
to interrupt you.
officials
It's
what
interesting you say
they
that,
mean by.
because I'm sorry to interrupt. Pezeshkian recently said something along the lines of, "Oh, well, if the Israelis kill Khamenei, then that's it. The Islamic Republic is gone." And I went, "Oh, what is what is he saying there? Actually, what do you think?"
It's interesting when, again, this just goes back to the regime change. Whether you mean constitutional reform, whether you mean do away with the Velayat Faqih, the supreme leader, or do you mean you want a military oligarchy that is not trying to destroy Israel? I mean, you have to ask them. But I think at this point, it is more rhetoric to me than reality. And that's why I alluded to, if you want to win a war or defeat someone from the air only, and tit for tat, quid pro quo, exchange, uh, military targeted military operations, that's one thing. But if you say we want to do regime change, I mean, let me just give you one example. Afghanistan. After 20 years, the Taliban are back in business, right? And what was the regime change with Karzai and the more secular? What did it become? So you have to ask the U.S., what is your objective? Or the Israelis in this case, what is your objective? To neutralize Iran nuclear program, to get a friendly puppet regime in power? And I think this is why it's a tall order. To me, it's just rhetorical and posturing, as opposed to maybe for more domestic purposes for Netanyahu himself and his cabinet than actually reality.
Also, a lot of talk here and little action, so to speak, in terms of that objective. What do you think the objective would be in terms of Israel's perspective?
Good question. I mean, Negar, I want to go back to the beginning of the 21st century, really, which starts with the 9/11, September 11 in the U.S. And you see how the world changed since 9/11. The war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, you had the Arab Spring, you had not only in Asia, but also you had in Africa, Darfur, and of course, Nigeria. And then you look at civil war in Yemen, civil war in Syria, and again, Ukraine, take one in 2014, and then 2022 again, Ukraine. So the world is going uh, to me, going in the wrong direction. Instead of uh, strengthening institution and global security and even regional security, the doctrine of might makes right is dictating. This is, I'm not even began to discuss Hezbollah and the proxy wars with Iran and Israel. So you see, if you ask me what the objective is, I think again, if the objective is to create a secure, peaceful Middle East, have a long-lasting peace, you have to have a political solution, not a military solution to the problem. And I think here is when Netanyahu comes short, and even you see the struggle within the Israelis cabinet and Israelis population, that might make right. It's not going to necessarily make you secure. What are, to me, the question becomes, as a states person looking at it, I would say, what is the military objective? But what is the ultimate objective? Is there a political solution to this? And I think that's where we're lacking, with all the talk about the eternal peace and eternal, and I'm sure you know that Trump a couple of times alluded to the idea that without the Islamic Republic's participation, there won't be any peace, or they have to be part of this agreement. So that makes it difficult for the politicians, especially if you have Netanyahu, who has also personal objectives to me at this point about how to deal with Iran. And of course, as you know, the controversy inside Israel about this ultimate objective. If you
That's
mention regime
fascinating.
change, it creates a problem.
Yeah. So things could actually get worse potentially.
Exactly. This is what the whole idea is, that if you don't have a political solution, think of, for example, the Palestinian cause. More than 2 million people, displaced. You don't have a settlement as such. What happens to Oslo Accord? What happens to the occupied territory? What happens to this? The idea that we use some technocrats to govern, it's, to me, is ridiculous, because you don't have a political solution. You can have all the technocrats in the world and they're expert in their field, but if you don't have the political will and the political mandate to address real problems of political nature, what is justice in this case, or what is the objective, then you'll still have a more violent reaction to these things.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because even if you look at the 12-day war in June between Iran and Israel, I mean, Israel took out a lot of the top commanders, a lot of top Iranian officials, and yet the system still remains in place.
And even if you dismantle the system, I just give you the example in Afghanistan. Even if you dismantle the system and replaced it with a puppet government or a friendly government, okay, the idea was the same thing happened in Iraq. You can win the war in 7 days or 7 weeks, but can you win the peace? You know, we talk that way about winning the peace, and winning the peace means part of it has to be justice and what is correct, but also, is there a political will to come up with political solutions? If might makes right, I can attack you, therefore I attack, then you see what happens. It's a cycle of violence will continue.
I just want to get your views on whether you think there's going to be more war and more violence between Iran and Israel in the coming weeks, in the coming months. And I wanted to play a clip for you of Elliot Abrams and then Dennis Ross. Elliot Abrams, of course, the former Iran envoy during the Trump administration, and then Dennis Ross under the Obama administration. We had a recent town hall in Washington, D.C. And so we'll just have a listen and get your reaction to those clips after.
People ruling Iran learned from their attack on Israel that it wasn't a very good idea. That what was the product militarily? The product was to lose most of their air defenses, to lose most of their nuclear program, and then to have an attack by the United States that eliminated a lot of the rest of their nuclear program. This was not a great idea. And they are the ones who decided to move from the shadow war into a direct hit.
And they did that because they thought they had a kind of impunity from us. And what Trump did, following up on what the Israelis did, I mean, the Israelis made it safe for us to do it because they took out all the air defense. But what he did is he signaled, you don't have impunity any longer. Now that was really important for the region because it said, okay, we really don't have to be so afraid of the Iranians anymore. And given the weakness of what's happened to the regional proxies, we were not really going to be intimidated by them either. So that is a very significant strategic development, but it's incomplete. And this is a regime that is focused on its survival. It always has been, but that's the first priority. It feels it can manage and sustain control, which is another reason why they're not looking for trouble on the outside right now.
I think they're looking at the same problem from different angles and viewpoint. It is true that after the proxy forces have been dismantled or significantly damaged, one of the cards that the Iranian hoped to create a buffer zone for their own security are gone. Not only Hashd al-Sha'bi or Hezbollah, but also, Hamas and that crescent of resistance is gone. So that one of the cards they played. The other cards they played was the enrichment beyond 60% enrichment, and of course their capability, missile capability, and that's significantly damaged, as it was clearly stated, and also done during the 12-day war. The US B-2 bombers also took a lot of facilities out. Whether the 400 kilogram almost nuclear enriched uranium are destroyed, it's a different story. But then the only cards on the basically in this game can be played by Iran is the threat of nuclear capability and not necessarily the bomb. And in this case, of course, if and when you don't have a political solution to this problem, then the question becomes, will they build it, we bomb it? But I don't know which part of this. Are you hoping by bombing the regime will become so weak that there will be internal revolution or the uprising of some segment of the IRGC or Artesh, if that's even possible to happen? So that's the meaning of regime change to them, but also signaling that we're willing to risk it all. My point was that you cannot do regime change from the air. that even when you do regime change with boots on the ground, you fail, and you may not be able to basically win the peace. So if you're using that as a signal to centers of power in Iran that you need to dismantle the nuclear program, but also that you need to stop this rhetoric about, eliminating Israel or the Zionist state, as they said. So there, the signal is very clear. But to make it conditional upon the last 3 years of Trump, meaning that, well, we have a friendly leader in the U.S. who can help us. And I'm not sure at this point Trump is willing to do that or give the green light for that to be done. Of course, you can argue that the first attack, the 12-day war, Netanyahu forced Trump's hand and basically forced him to do something because, as you know, he wants to get credit for eliminating Iran's threat. So that's another,
And
on
he's
the
trying to
individual
take it
level.
right now. So
Netanyahu outplaying Trump, and Trump said, "Okay, I'm going to claim I made the Middle East a more peaceful nuclear-free zone." And I'm not sure how he's going to do that, but that's the idea.
yeah, and with the points that you made, I would assume that people within the Iranian regime are also having these same thoughts and understandings and perceptions of the limitations and what could actually happen. And just a side note, speaking of a town hall, we have another town hall coming up Monday, the 17th, with Norman Rule, who was with the CIA for 34 years, covering the Middle East, as well as Mark Dupovitz from the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. So happening Monday in Washington, D.C. for those who can attend. And I just wanted to conclude, Dr. Hessami, with how are the Iranian people feeling about all of this? I mean, there's 90 million people in the diaspora. Of course, there are certain views, but what about the people of Iran? And we don't necessarily have the accurate polling or access to everything that's happening there. But it's not a monolithic country for sure.
Yeah. Well, the expectation, at least the Israelis' expectation, seemed to have been that if they attacked Iran directly and dismantled the command and control centers, plus some notable generals, people may rise up, and the internal pressure with all the social political problem that exists inside Iran after woman life liberty movement, the expectation of the Israelis was that this is done. We can cause internal revolution and or a coup d'etat, or at least do away with the supreme leader. Well, that hasn't happened. And I think they may be more inclined to play the nationalism card and create some kind of a rally behind the flag factor once they hit Evin prison, the Israelis, and you see that people, wonder what's going on. And I know for a fact many people went to the coast to enjoy during the war, to leave Tehran and go to the coast, to the Caspian Sea region to enjoy, but also they knew that this is not the time to make a revolution, and especially from this limited command and control, destruction of command and control. But also it's true that for some people, it's a revenge factor, and they said, "Oh my God, somebody is killing all these people whose hands are tainted with the blood of our youngsters." But at the same time, so many people also argue that this is my home country, and attacking even command and control and going after certain area that was off, meaning water supply and oil and other facilities, is it's bound to raise some kind of patriotism or rally behind the flag factor, and that's what I see. That's what's going to happen. So it's a divide. You're right. That's the 90 million people. I also want to mention that as we had merchants of sanction and merchants of war, perhaps in Iran and also in both countries, I should say, then you can see that for domestic purposes, you'll also see divergence about these things on that level as well.
Yeah, and you see even internal debates within Iran itself. So did the Israeli government then misread Iran? And could that have potentially been maybe their consultations and conversations with folks in the diaspora, some who may have never even set foot inside Iran, some who haven't set foot inside Iran for over 40 years?
So absolutely. This is not the first time. Remember Iraq and Chalabi. Chalabi sold a bill of goods to the Bush administration that you will be viewed as liberators and they will open their arms. People of Iraq will open their arms. And the same thing was said more or less about Afghanistan, if you remember. But people are ready. They want change. Taliban is oppressive. It is Wahhabi Islam. Look what happened. And after 20 years, Taliban back in business. So the question becomes, were they led, or their intelligence had led them to believe that there would be a revolution or a coup d'etat inside IRGC apparatus and or the army or armed forces, or even people coming to the street? And here is miscalculation, I think, on the Israelis' part about when you start a war and when you do even limited, that this rally behind the flag, although they may say they're dictators, we're upset, but we don't want a foreign government to determine not only who what our next government should look like, but also cause regime change this way. And I think that that's the divergence that you see. Some people fall on this side, some on the other. But as you see, the structure of power was intact, basically.
Thank you so much. That's Professor Aram Hessami. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you.
Jasmine Nemo joins us now on Eye for Iran. Thank you so much for being here, Jasmine.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Likewise, you were in the room with President Ahmed al-Shara when he met with Congressman Brian Mast, and you helped actually make that happen. So walk us through that, and what was that moment like for you?
So the moment was very unexpected for me. I'll start a little bit at the beginning. So after the fall of the regime, we had really gotten back involved in DC politics, trying to advocate for Syria. And we've been trying to nurture these relationships. Congressman Mast was one of these members of Congress that we had started discussions with and meetings with to try and talk about the lifting of the Caesar sanctions, amongst other members of the House and the Senate. And so it's interesting enough that, I'm based here in Florida and he is a congressman of my state. So that's kind of where the dialogue started to happen. And it has just snowballed from there. And so this is basically just a result of that quiet work that we've been doing for months and months since the fall of the regime. It went step by step, but now we're at a point where it's truly a historic moment, not only for Syria, but for the world. The fact that President al-Shara is the first Syrian president in history to be invited to the White House is a huge deal, versus where he could never even, travel to America. And so this meeting was monumental. I believe it really gave a lot of people in Syria hope, which is, I think, what the most important thing is right now for the people on the ground. So it was really like an amazing moment. I'm really happy to have been there to witness it.
And Jasmine, what did they talk about?
So they talked about many things. I don't think we should go specifically into details about what they discussed, but it was a very positive meeting, very positive outcome. Brian Mast had posted online that they had broke bread. His image of President al-Shara has shifted and changed a bit. So I think those are the slight shifts that we see that really is what makes progress happen.
When it comes to Iran, al-Shara just did an interview recently with the Washington Post, and he said, you know what, we've driven out the Iranian forces, of course, during the Assad regime. Iran was basically overseeing and partnered with the president of Syria at that time, and now we're seeing a huge shift regionally. What are your views on how he views Iran right now? Did he talk about Iran at all, for example, like he did in the Washington Post article?
So Iran specifically wasn't discussed, but what we're seeing is a big shift. And Iran, or I should say the Iranian regime, was an ally of the Syrian regime. And so they worked hand in hand. Iran basically used Syria to become a proxy nation. They spread chaos amongst the people, and it became almost a piece of chess in their larger game. And so, it was very difficult for the people at the time. And so now Syrians, and it's safe to say President al-Shara, and please, I don't speak on behalf of the Syrian government anyway, but just from what I've seen myself, the people are ready to close that old chapter and move on to a new one. So it's a touchy subject, but as things progress and the government progresses successfully, hopefully we'll see them strong and stable allies here in the U.S. and hopefully of its neighboring countries as well.
And I know you don't speak for the Syrian government, of course, so you don't speak for al-Shara, but you've met him on a number of occasions. You've gotten to know him somewhat. Can you describe to us how you feel, his outlook is towards the Islamic Republic? Like, could there ever be any relations between Syria and Iran under maybe even a new leadership of some sort? What are your thoughts on that?
So that's a very interesting question, and I think it's a very long-term question. I think right now what they're looking at is really stabilizing their own country internally, stabilizing and really reintegrating themselves on the global stage with neighboring countries, rebuilding that security for their country internally and externally, and then really becoming a strong ally of the United States. I think that's really one of the largest concerns and things that they've been negotiating and working towards. So, I guess we'll see how things play out, but I think they have a lot that they need to do to restabilize the country, and so I think their thinking has shifted more towards the West, and that's what the people want, and that's what us, as Americans want.
Interesting. So from east to west.
Exactly. That's what we're hoping for, yes.
And when it comes to Iran, as a Syrian person, or Syrian American, I should say, but someone of Syrian origin, what is your knowledge of Iran's influence right now? Is it they are completely out? Are they trying to get back in? Are you hearing anything, especially as we see, sectarian violence in the country?
So it's been tough. I know that the most important thing for Syrians in general has been to secure the country. And that's been very difficult with over 5 decades of, Eastern influence and Iran included. So I think just, rebuilding those telecommunication networks, rebuilding security, getting everything
Which, by
integrated
the
with the
way, the
West.
telecommunication networks are actually still operated by Iran.
I know, and that's an issue. So that's been part of the concern. We used to have to try to reach out to people in the government there, and we used to have to wait like 4 days for a response. So that telecommunication has been a big issue. I know they're working on addressing that, and we're hopeful that's coming soon. It's like one of their top priorities. But it's a tough situation, and one of the most inspiring things that I see when it comes to Syria and Iran is, we faced, or I should say, like, I'm Syrian American, but the Syrians faced a brutal regime under Assad for over 5 decades, and the war was just horrific. It left people in starvation, no electric, no water. So it's been very difficult. And so you see a separation between the Assad regime and the Syrian people. And I think we see something very similar in Iran with the Iranian regime and the Iranian people. So I like to always talk about that when we discuss Iran and Syria because I really hope that Syria can be a beacon of hope for the Iranian people. And I think all the people want something very similar, and so we're hoping to see that progress very soon.
And so, what does this mean then for the reconstruction of Syria and then again for the balance of power in the region, especially as we see the Islamic Republic's influence fade in general?
So, it's a double-edged sword because as Syria progresses to build its stability, it's neighbored by 5 countries, and so it's a very strategic geographical location in the world. So, we call Syria a swing state. So basically, it can be swung to the east or to the west. What we're trying to do is swing it here to the west. And so I think as Syria's stability continues to grow and the discussions and negotiations of regional security continue to progress, we may see some of that Iranian regime meddling back into these types of situations. And so it's going to be hard, and it's really going to be a balancing act between what's happening internally in the country and what's happening externally. So uh, we're hopeful for what's to come, but it's going to be, from what I predict, very interesting and complicated situation, but we're hopeful.
So, the Islamic Republic could potentially, what you're saying is take advantage of the situation, if you will.
Well, I mean, like I said, they have proxy networks inside. Telecommunications is still present. We're trying to expel it, but what we're doing is hoping that once they build the alliance with the United States and their regional neighbors, which is really what we're working towards as well. I mean, I think it's really important, these security talks that are being had with Israel, because I mean, essentially, it's really all one common enemy, which is the Islamic Republic, the regime in Iran. So, if we're able to join forces all together, I think really we're going to have a much stronger basis on fighting this extremism and fighting this influence that's trying to push itself back into the country.
What do you make of the sectarian violence that we're seeing right now in the country and the divide?
Look, so what I'm hoping for and what I'd advocate for is a unified Syria, one Syria. What we're looking is for respect and dignity for all religious groups, all ethnicities. Syria is so multi-layeral, and that's truly the foundation of who Syria is and who the people are. And so respect amongst all groups is so important. And, when we're in Syria, we advocate for respecting one's neighbors, and the people really on the ground, and I've been to Syria several times, they do respect each other, and we do see this common love of one another. We had done, for example, there had been several Jewish delegations that had gone to Syria, and all they reported was positive feedback, and the people were asking questions, and they wanted to know more about them. So this is part of the history of Syria, and I think that's what makes it so beautiful. But at the same time, it's also what makes it so complicated.
And any final thoughts on what you're advocating for in DC?
So, like I said, I mean, really what we're looking for is a stable Syria, a unified Syria, a Syria that is an ally of the West, ally of the United States. What we're looking for is to expel any type of extremism and just build a country, such as what we saw in Japan and Germany and Vietnam. I mean, these were foes that turned into friends. And so that's what we're looking to do here in Syria. We're looking to strengthen that friendship between Syria and the West. So that's really what we're working very hard towards.
I've never met President al-Shara, and I'm curious, what's he like in private, in person?
So he's actually a very, very collected person. His responses are always very diplomatic. Um, every time I've seen him, he's been very respected, very respectable, and so that's my opinion, and that's what I've seen. And it honestly, after this trip to DC, I really have a lot of hope for the future of Syria and also for the people of Syria. And what we're hoping is that he and his leadership continue to be the voice of the Syrian people and continue to work with us here in America.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's Jasmine Nemo joining us on Eye for Iran.
Thank you so much for having me.
You can sign up for our weekly briefing newsletter at iranintl.com/newsletter. We deliver what you need to know with top stories, key analysis, and exclusive reports direct to your inbox. The Eye for Iran podcast series is brought to you by Iran International, your go-to destination for expert Iranian news in both Farsi and English. For more, you can head to our dedicated English website, iranintl.com/en.